The monster catching formula is strictly associated with a red and white ball here in the West. Since 1996, Pokémon has employed this concept in at least 25 games, and their success is out of this world. In fact, they are so successful that developers try to copy them all the time. However, none of them reach even the slightest of Pokémon's success. Usually. But before there were Red, Green and Blue, there were other games propelling the creature capturing formula forward. Specifically, 2 of them had a much greater impact than the rest. And I assure you, there's a lot of interesting things to discuss about the second one. But before we can talk about any of that, we have to start from the beginning. Set in a dystopian world overrun by demons, digital devil story Megami Tensei took the first important step towards the concept of capturing monsters in 1987. Just like Pokémon, the world was inhabited by creatures that you encountered randomly and fought through a turn-based combat system. But other than that, it's hard to see any similarities from what first strikes the eye. One was a dark first-person adventure aimed for an older audience, and the other one was a happy top-down adventure fitting seemingly everyone. While there was no Pokeballs in Megami Tensei, there was this other thing called a negotiation system. As the player wandered through the game and stumbled upon a creature they really liked, they had a way of making it join them. And just like in a nightclub a Friday night, they did it by talking. Or rather, negotiating. I guess the metaphor really works best for us with a challenged appearance. Depending on the demon's temperament and the player's choice in the conversation, the demon could successfully join the player's party and then be summoned in battle. However, there wasn't many alternatives for making the creature stronger. While there was no levels for the demon, the player could make them evolve, just like in Pokémon. Kind of. By trading 2 recruited demons of the player's choice, it was possible to fuse them into a new one. Hidden in the game's code were specific combinations or recipes that would result in better demons. If the demons chosen by the player wasn't compatible, it would result in a Dryad, the Trevenant of Megami Tensei. Most people would agree that this game was the pioneer of the creature capturing genre. But as far as similarities with Pokémon goes, this is where the list ends. To find a more obvious source of inspiration, we'd had to wait another 5 years after Megami Tensei was released. It's not a secret that Dragon Quest is very popular in Japan. Back in 2006, the Japanese gaming magazine Famitsu voted on the 100 best video games of all time. 8 Dragon Quest games made it to the list, and 3 of them made it to the top 10, while a 4th just missed the list. And to further emphasize how beloved the series is in Japan, we can ask Yu Miyake, executive producer for Dragon Quest XI. In an interview with Game Informer, he confirmed that when Dragon Quest III was released in 1988 for the Famicom, the police asked them to change their release policy. Since the game went on the shelves on a Thursday, a significant number of kids skipped school all over the country to buy and play the game. To prevent this from happening again, Dragon Quest has since stuck to a strict weekend-only release schedule. In 1992, Dragon Quest V was released for the Super Famicom. This time around, the game design took a bit of a different route than the usual Dragon Quest games. Other than being the usual top-down JRPG adventure, this game was famous for expanding some of the monster recruiting elements from the Megami Tensei series. Just like in Pokémon, your recruited monsters now had their own scalable attributes. You could even store monsters outside of your party. But instead of going to Bill's PC, you talked to Monstergramps, who operated the Monster Daycare Center. By the way, did you know that there's actually a creature capturing mechanic on YouTube? If you made it this far in the video, then why not join my team? Just press that subscribe button. You're not a teleporting Abra, right? Great, now let's get back to Dragon Quest. The upbeat feeling of both the story and the overall visuals is a lot closer to Pokémon than the dark, gloomy aesthetics of Megami Tensei. While there are no interviews stating this fact, it's not hard to see that Ken Sugimori, the original concept artist at Game Freak, drew inspiration from the famous manga creator Akira Toriyama. Toriyama, who also happens to be the concept artist of the Dragon Quest series, and the genius creator of the world-renowned manga Dragon Ball. Tokyo Game Life seems to agree. As stated on X, Akira Toriyama heavily influenced Ken Sugimori's art style. which is easily discernible in early Pokémon illustrations. Toriyama's impact on gaming extends far beyond just games he personally worked on. Upon closer examination for specific examples, traces of inspiration become apparent. There are crabs, spiked hairs, piles of slime, monsters with gas problems, snails in shells, rocks with only heads and arms, ghosts, and the list goes on. While it's challenging to argue that Ken Sugimori copied Akira Toriyama's art, it's even more challenging to argue that he wasn't inspired at all. Even if you didn't experience Dragon Quest as a game, it would have been impossible to not have been exposed to Toriyama's art living in Japan. But we have to remember, inspiration isn't something negative. It's how we're able to transform good ideas into great ones, or create something entirely different, filling gaps we sometimes didn't even know existed. Imagine a world without demons to negotiate with, or quirky Dragon Ball lookalike monsters to recruit. Would there be a Snorlax sleeping on a bridge? A Victory Bell swallowing the head of a purple-haired dude? Probably not. There certainly wouldn't be any paths.